Our goal here is to take a look at one of the first big conflicts that Greece as a whole was involved in, and we refer to it as the Persian Wars. Now, when we say Persian Wars, it's worth understanding what Persia means. All right, they were the first true empire in world history in that they spread out from their home base in what's now modern-day Iran. They conquered foreign peoples, but they had the resources to sustain a long-term land-based empire. Now, at its peak, under the ruler Darius I, it stretched from the Indus River in the east all the way to the Balkans and Eastern Europe, and we can see it included North Africa as well. It had a highly successful, and this is where we get into the template, it had a highly successful central administration, sophisticated infrastructure that had postal roads and bridges, a professional army, and an official unifying language. An official language no matter where you were at. They're successful because they allow local leaders to retain control and act as officials, as long as everyone in that area pays their taxes and follows the rules. Now, Greek-speaking peoples, as we've previously seen, have spread out from their home bases. All right, they've spread out throughout the Mediterranean, and they've established colonies, some of which are under Persian control. Thousands of Greeks served in the Persian navy, while Greek stonecutters were employed in the empire. And the personal physician of King Darius was actually Greek. Now, when we say Lydia, we're talking about this region right here, and this gives us a little bit better view on the map. Now, Sardis, which is in the Lydia region of Asia Minor, is an administrative center of the empire, and it was even connected by the royal road. There were Greeks in the region who wanted to stir up trouble, so the Persians marched out to deal with it. All right, so these are the Asian cities that revolt. There was one Athenian who attempted to gain an alliance with Sparta to repel the Persians, because these Greeks are what we would call Ionian Greeks, kind of an ethnicity of Greek-speaking peoples, and Athens considered themselves the main Ionians, like kind of the parent of Ionian Greeks. Now again, one Athenian wants to gain an alliance with Sparta to repel them, but he was actually physically thrown out of the city. He then went to Athens, where he told them that the Persians were going to force an exiled leader to return to Athens and assume control. So Athens prepares for war based on this statement. And the Persians launch a fleet of 600 ships that fought off the coast of Miletus. We can see that here. They were on the brink of success, but a storm wrecked nearly every ship off the coast, and it took 2 years to rebuild. All right, so not successful, but they vowed to return. They did vow to return. So that explains kind of the Persians and where they're coming from. Now, ultimately, it's important to understand that the actual official histories of the Persian Empire and the Persians themselves, they barely mention the Persian Wars because it was simply one of many conflicts that the empire was involved in. In the West, it's viewed as more important. That's why our main sources come from the Greeks, so they come from the West. It's gone down in Western history as this myth of Europeans beating back so-called barbarians, meaning non-Europeans and non-Western speaking peoples. Both of these ideas would be false, as close examination bears out. Regarding the war itself, Marathon is one of the first big engagements. And if you're thinking to yourself, I've heard of Marathon, yeah, it's probably from the type of race. The Persian force that invades is concentrated on Athens, because Athens is the crown jewel of Attica, that triangular region. And they're the ones who had aided the Ionian city-states in Asia Minor. Now, Persian forces are going to sweep in from the north, and they're bearing down on Athens. So, an Athenian runner, a professional runner, named Pheidippides, is sent to Sparta to ask for assistance. Now, he apparently ran. He ran about 140 miles from Athens to Sparta, and he did it in 24 hours. That's the equivalent of running from Green Bay to Franklin, Wisconsin, which is south of Milwaukee. All right, it's a 2-hour and 15-minute drive. He ran that the whole way. Now, the Spartans, when we see slow response, the Spartans were actually celebrating a religious holiday. And yeah, they were willing to help, but they refused to send troops until the full moon, which was in another week. So this plays on the idea of how the Spartans took their religion, the advice of the gods, and their rituals very seriously. Now, the best source of the battle comes from Herodotus, which we can't always rely on him, but we believe there were about 2.5 times as many Persians as Athenians. The hoplite army, so this idea of discipline, the disciplined Athenian hoplites intentionally had a weak center and stronger wings. They wanted the center to break so that the Persians would advance. When they did that, the wings closed in on both sides. So the Persians were surrounded. The superior discipline and cohesion of the hoplites won the day. Now, the Persians also wore light armor and weren't really prepared for this type of battle. They had 6,000 casualties compared to 200 for Athens. 6,000 to 200. It was also written that a runner covered the 26.2 miles from Marathon to Athens. So basically, you're running from Green Bay to Appleton. He yelled, "Nike," which means victory, and he collapsed dead on the spot. The commemoration of this event, which we're not sure if that actually happened, but it reinforces the idea that the Greeks believed in these myths. The commemoration occurred at the Olympic Games every 4 years. That's why the marathon is an Olympic event. Now, the Spartans showed up as the battle ended, so they were too late to the party. But this also validated the idea of democracy. The people could make a decision, stick to it, and win a battle. And it also was said to silence those who didn't believe in it. So we begin with Marathon. The Battle of Thermopylae also stands out from this. You know, the Persians retreat. The king, Darius, tries to raise taxes, to raise money, but he fell ill and died. His oldest son, Xerxes, becomes ruler, and he has to put down some internal rebellions, which are bound to happen when the leader dies, but he sets his sights back on Greece. Athens had prepared for war by building up their fleet of ships that were called triremes. And these ships, these triremes, are highly mobile and could ram other ships. Now, about 30 city-states are going to band together, and they are going to form the Hellenic League. It's an alliance of all of these city-states to resist the Persian threat, and given how independent they were, this was remarkable. The fact that they were willing to come together. Athens provided most of the naval power, while the Spartans were the most experienced soldiers. Now, the Persians are coming from the north. And Herodotus wrote of millions of Persians, but it was probably about 100,000, with thousands of Greek conscripts. Since they were coming from the north, and we can see Thermopylae here on the map, since they're coming from the north, a force met the Persians at the mountain pass. This mountain pass at Thermopylae was really, and you can see the mountains on each side, it was the only way to reach this southern portion of Greece. Now, the Greek forces waited. Now, there was a secret road that a Greek trader later gave up to the Persians, but the forces held out. And when it was clear that they had been betrayed and the Persians had found this secret road and they were all going to die, the Spartan king, Leonidas, sent most of the forces home, except for 300 Spartans, their slaves, the Helots, and there were a few other forces that he made stay behind. Now, Leonidas famously said, "Have a quick breakfast, for you will be eating dinner in the underworld, in Hades." They all ended up dying, so that's why this becomes the last stand of the 300. There were 2 Spartans who were well safe. They were kind of in the safe zone, suffering from eye inflammation. One just charged straight into battle and died, while the other returned to Sparta, and he was shunned, called the Trembler. The Spartans really hated cowardice. Now this actually gives the Greeks time to prepare for a final showdown with the Persians. Now, when we look at consequences, the fighting has to end somehow. So Xerxes and his forces after Thermopylae, where they sustained heavy casualties, they were forced to wait for the Persian navy to circle around the Peloponnese to block any attempts to aid the Greeks. Now, there was an Athenian general who tricked the Persian leader. He tricked him into thinking that you need to attack quick and destroy the Greek fleet. The Persian navy was destroyed at what was called Salamis because they were tricked into going into a narrow channel. The Greek fleet was waiting for them and easily outmaneuvered them. The Persian navy, if we could call it that, the sailors, they're raised on land. They can't swim, so nearly every man who went into the water drowned. And Xerxes was so mad that he ordered the execution of all of his naval captains, who were Phoenician, meaning they were great sailors, some of the finest sailors of the ancient world. The final blow comes at this land, Plataea, where Xerxes actually left, and he just made a token force, led by his son-in-law, fight off the approaching Greeks. Leonidas's nephew led the assault, and the Greeks won. The Persians never rebuilt their mighty navy, and the Greeks chased them all the way back to Sardis and killed them along the way. So this is kind of the decisive blow, for the time being, for the Persians. The Greeks, for the first time in history, had banded together and defeated a common enemy. Sparta, Athens, the Ionian cities, they agreed on something, and they accomplished their goal. Now, they don't share political boundaries like the Persian Empire, but it proves that the bonds of common customs and a common language can succeed. It can win the day. Now, this validates the skills of the hoplites, but more importantly, the Athenian navy establishes its dominance. Athens truly rules the waves, and this changes the dynamic in the Aegean Sea. Now, from the outset, Sparta fears that Athens would grow too powerful, and they actually requested that Athens not rebuild their walls, which had been destroyed. The Athenian leader, a guy named Themistocles, he refused and immediately began work on new fortifications before anyone could stop him. Now, interestingly enough, the Athenians did refuse to rebuild any temples that the Persians destroyed. So the Acropolis, which had been destroyed by the Persians, it remained in ruins. Now, the immediate threat was gone. There's a lot of parallels here to World War II. The immediate threat in World War II, you've got the Japanese Empire, you have the German Nazis. The USSR and the US band together to defeat that common enemy. Once the common enemy is gone, they go back to distrusting each other. Same idea here. The Persians are the common enemy, the immediate threat. Once it's gone, Athens and Sparta go back to immediately distrusting one another.